This seat isn't for you, sweetheart. First class is for people who actually built their careers, not diversity hires who got lucky. Victoria Ashford didn't whisper it. She said it loud enough for the entire cabin to hear her voice smooth as silk and sharp as a blade. She stood in the aisle of skybound Airlines Flight 627. Her cream Chanel suit perfectly tailored her diamond bracelet, catching the overhead lights every inch of her radiating expensive confidence. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, and her designer heels clicked against the cabin floor with the authority of someone who'd never been told no. Dr. Ilara Mitchell looked at the woman blocking her path to seat 2. The seat clearly printed on her boarding pass, and felt a familiar weight settle in her chest. She'd seen this look before. The quick scan up and down, the automatic dismissal, the smile that wasn't really a smile, the assumption that she couldn't possibly belong in this space, in this cabin, in this world of leather seats and champagne service. What Victoria Ashford didn't know was that in exactly 85 minutes, the elegant woman standing in her way would lose everything. Her reputation, her career, a $400 million contract, all because she refused to move from a seat that was never hers to begin with. Before we dive into this, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. And if this story already has your attention, hit that subscribe button and give the video a like, because what happens next isn't just about airline seats. It's about the moment when arrogance meets consequence, and when the person you underestimate turns out to be the only one who can save you. Now let's rewind and see exactly how we got here. JFK, International Airport Terminal 5, Thursday evening, 6:30 p.m. The first-class lounge hummed with the quiet energy of people who traveled this way regularly. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers, the scent of fresh coffee mixed with expensive cologne. In the far corner, away from the clusters of business travelers making last-minute calls, Dr. Ilara Mitchell sat with her tablet reviewing the most important contract of her career. She was 41 years old with natural hair pulled back in an elegant bun, wearing a charcoal blazer over a simple silk blouse. No logos, no flash, just quiet competence. The kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Her dark eyes moved across the screen, absorbing every clause, every specification, every number that represented 5 years of relentless work. Tonight's flight to London Heathrow would change everything. The document on Ilara's tablet was 47 pages long, but she'd memorized most of it. Novatech Cryogenics, her company, her creation. Born from frustration and determination 15 years ago, now worth just over $2 billion and about to become something much bigger. The technology was elegant in its simplicity. Cryogenic stabilizers, small components no bigger than a coffee mug that regulated temperature flow in extreme conditions. Medical transport, aviation systems, deep-sea equipment. Anywhere that precision cooling mattered, Novatech had become the standard. Her proprietary gel formula and monitoring hardware had made organ transplants viable for triple the time. Hearts could travel from New York to Los Angeles without losing viability. Livers from donors in Texas could save lives in Maine. It was world-changing work, and tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. London time, she would sign the contract that made it official with the British National Health Service. Her phone buzzed. David Chen, her assistant back in the Manhattan office. She read his text. Everything confirmed. Car service at Heathrow. NHS team ready for breakfast meeting. Seat 2, a confirmed window first row. You've got this, boss. Ilara smiled. David had been with her since the early days when Novatech operated out of a converted warehouse in Newark, and she did her own bookkeeping on weekends. Now they had 3 facilities, 200 employees, and partnerships with medical centers across 17 countries. Tomorrow's NHS deal would add 40 hospitals and open the door to all of Europe. She glanced at her watch. a Patek Philippe purchased after Novatech's first patent was approved. Not because she needed an expensive watch, but because she'd promised herself she would. A reminder that the girl who'd slept in her car at 26 had made it. The boarding announcement echoed through the lounge. Skybound Airlines Flight 627 to London Heathrow now boarding first-class passengers through Gate 47. Alara gathered her things with practiced efficiency. Tablet into its leather case, case into her briefcase, her Burberry trench coat folded over her arm. She'd traveled this route a dozen times. She knew the rhythm. First-class lounge to gate priority boarding, left turn into the cabin, settle into her preferred seat, 2A window. First row, perfect privacy and a view of the wing, that beautiful piece of engineering that would carry her across an ocean while she slept. She walked through the terminal with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. Past the duty-free shops, past the crowded gate areas for economy flights, past the families juggling strollers and the business travelers typing on laptops balanced on their knees. The first-class lane was nearly empty, just her and a couple in matching cashmere coats ahead of her. The gate agent scanned her boarding pass with a professional smile. "Have a wonderful flight, Dr. Mitchell." Alara nodded her thanks and stepped onto the jet bridge. The familiar enclosed tunnel, the slight upward slope, the sound of her shoes on the industrial carpet. Through the door of the aircraft where the cooler air hit her face, and the distinctive smell of airplane, that mix of recycled air and industrial cleaning solutions wrapped around her. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Mitchell." The lead flight attendant stood at the entrance, a woman in her mid-30s with auburn hair pulled into a sleek bun. Her name tag read Natalie Porter. "We're so pleased to have you with us this evening. Seat 2A is just to your left. Can I take your coat and get you settled with a glass of champagne?" "That would be lovely. Thank you, Natalie." Alara's voice was warm but not overly familiar. Professional courtesy, the kind she'd perfected over years of navigating spaces where warmth could be mistaken for weakness. She turned left into the first-class cabin. The individual suites were cocoons of cream leather and polished wood accents. Soft lighting from above. The gentle hum of the ventilation system. Privacy dividers between seats creating the illusion of personal space at 35,000 feet. This was the part of flying she'd grown to appreciate. Not for the luxury itself, but for the quiet. The ability to work or sleep without interruption. The respect that came with a ticket this expensive. She approached row 2 and stopped. Someone was in her seat. A woman, blonde, impeccably dressed in a cream designer suit, was aggressively stuffing an oversized Louis Vuitton carry-on into the overhead bin above seat 2A. She was breathing hard from the effort, her face slightly flushed, her diamond jewelry catching the light with every movement. Behind her, a man in an expensive but rumpled navy suit stood in the aisle, blocking it completely. He was holding a briefcase and a tablet, looking impatient. Alara waited politely for the woman to finish. The woman grunted, shoved the bag one final time, and slammed the overhead bin closed with more force than necessary. Then she turned and slumped into the window seat. Alara's seat. The man beside her, presumably her husband, dropped into seat 2B without even glancing up. Alara cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me." The woman looked up. Her eyes, a pale blue that matched her suit, moved over Alara with the kind of assessment that took less than 2 seconds but communicated everything. The quick flick from face to shoes to briefcase and back again. The slight tightening around her mouth. The way her posture shifted from relaxed to defensive. Yes, her tone wasn't quite rude yet, but it wasn't friendly either. "I believe you're in my seat." Alara kept her voice even pleasant. She'd learned long ago that tone mattered more than words in moments like this. The woman blinked. "I don't think so." She gestured vaguely toward the seat across the aisle. "That one's yours. 2B. My boarding pass is for 2A." Alara held it up. The letters and numbers were clear printed in bold. Seat 2A. Hayes Alara. Doctor. The woman squinted at the boarding pass but didn't really look at it. There must be some mistake. We always sit here. She turned to the man beside her. Right, Richard. The man. Richard finally looked up from his tablet. His expression was one of mild annoyance, as if Alara were a flight attendant asking him to turn off his phone during takeoff. Right. We're in the correct seats. 2A and 2B. Covington. He said their last name like it meant something. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The gate agent must have made an error with your pass. It happens all the time. I'm sure if you just take the other seat, we can avoid any confusion. Alara felt the familiar tightness in her chest, but her face remained perfectly calm. I appreciate that you're settled, but this is my assigned seat. Perhaps you could check your boarding passes to confirm your actual seats? Richard sighed heavily, the kind of sigh that suggested this entire interaction was beneath him. Look, he said, his voice carrying that particular brand of condescension that wealthy men perfected. We're platinum members. We've been flying this route for 15 years. The system knows where we sit. You must have been reassigned. Just take the other seat. It's exactly the same anyway. Behind them, other first-class passengers were starting to board. A few glanced curiously at the tableau in row 2. A tall man in his late 20s with dark hair and a leather messenger bag paused in the aisle taking in the scene. He pulled out his phone. From row 3, a woman with long dark hair and silver hoop earrings whispered to her companion, then lifted her phone as well. Alara saw the phones recognized what was happening and made a choice. She would not be the angry black woman. She would not raise her voice. She would simply insist calmly and clearly on what was rightfully hers. Ma'am, sir, she said, addressing both of them. Now I understand this is inconvenient, but I need to sit in my assigned seat. If there's been an error with your reservations, I'm sure the flight attendants can help sort it out. The blonde woman's expression hardened. Her mouth formed a tight line. There's no error. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping but somehow becoming sharper. These seats are ours. Maybe you should double-check your ticket class. This is first class, not premium economy, not coach. First class. The implication hung in the air heavy and unmistakable. I'm aware of where I am, Alara said quietly. I'd like to speak with a flight attendant, please. A younger flight attendant appeared, drawn by the building tension. She was in her early 20s with dark hair pulled back and a nervous energy that suggested she was relatively new. Her name tag read Emma Liu. She looked from Alara to the couple in the seats, her eyes widening slightly as she processed the situation. Is there a problem? Emma asked, her voice a little too high-pitched. Victoria Ashford, because that's who the blonde woman was, though Alara didn't know it yet, seized control of the narrative immediately. Yes, there is. This woman is insisting she has our seats. My husband and I are settled. We've been sitting here for 10 minutes. Our bags are stowed. She gestured at the overhead bin like it was evidence in a trial. Tell her she needs to take her assigned seat so we can depart on time. Emma turned to Alara, clearly hoping for an easy resolution. Ma'am, could I see your boarding pass? Alara handed it over without comment. Emma studied it, then looked at the seat number printed on the bulkhead. Her young face fell as she realized this wasn't going to be simple. Sir, ma'am, Emma said, turning to the couple. It appears this is indeed Dr. Mitchell's assigned seat. Could I check your boarding passes, please? I don't need to show you anything. Victoria's voice rose just enough to draw more attention. We're Richard and Victoria Ashford. Our passes say first class, and we're here. She's not? It's that simple. She looked directly at Alara, now her pale blue eyes cold. Are you really going to displace us? For her? The words for her carried in weight that made several passengers turn their heads. In row 3, Tyler Brennan, a 29-year-old tech journalist from Seattle, had his phone out and was openly recording now. He leaned toward the man beside him, Daniel Cruz, a finance executive, and muttered, "This is insane. Are you seeing this?" Daniel nodded, his expression dark. "I'm seeing it." Across the aisle, Sofia Ramirez, a travel vlogger with 300,000 followers, had started a live stream. Her phone was angled discreetly, but her voice was clear as she narrated into her wireless mic. "We're on Skybound Flight 627 to London, and we're watching something unbelievable unfold. A black woman, clearly holding a valid boarding pass for seat 2A, is being told by a white couple that this is their seat. The crew is here now. Let's see what happens." Her screen showed 47 viewers, then 89, then 134. Richard Ashford pulled out his boarding pass with exaggerated patience, as if dealing with a particularly slow child. He thrust it at Emma. "Here, Covington, first class." Satisfied, Emma smoothed out the crumpled paper. Her face went pale. "Sir, your assigned seats are 3C and 3D. She pointed behind them. "One row back aisle seats." "That's impossible." Victoria snatched the pass from Emma's hand, staring at it like it had personally betrayed her. "They must have downgraded us. This is outrageous." Richard called the service desk. "No one has been downgraded." Emma tried to explain, her voice shaking slightly. "It seems there was an aircraft change. The system reassigned everyone based on the new configuration. These things happen sometimes." "I don't care what happened." Richard's voice was rising now, losing its veneer of civility. "I am not moving. This young lady," he waved dismissively at Alara, "can take 3C. I'm sure she'll be perfectly comfortable there." He looked at Alara with a smile that made her stomach turn. "Probably more room than you're used to anyway, right?" The mask finally dropped completely. Tyler's phone captured every word. Sophia's livestream viewer count hit 412. A woman in row 4. Jessica Walsh, a medical student heading home to London, gasped audibly. "Oh my God," she whispered. Alara felt every eye in the cabin on her. The heat of attention, the weight of expectation. Part of her wanted to walk away, take the other seat, avoid the conflict, get to London, sign the deal, move on with her life. That's what she would have done at 25, at 30 even. But at 41, Dr. Alara Mitchell, CEO of Novatech Cryogenics, who had built a company from nothing, who had fought for every patent and every contract and every shred of respect, she was done stepping aside. "What I am or am not used to," she said, her voice dropping to a temperature that could flash freeze nitrogen, "is irrelevant. You are in my seat. You have been shown proof of this. You are now being disruptive and insulting passengers." She turned her attention to Emma. "I need you to get your purser or your captain. This requires someone with actual authority." It was a direct order delivered with the kind of voice that made executives in boardrooms straighten their spines. Emma nodded quickly, grateful for an escape route. "Yes, ma'am. Right away." She hurried toward the galley. "Oh, calling for the manager." Victoria's voice dripped with mockery. How predictable. Natalie Porter, the lead flight attendant who had greeted Alara at the door, appeared moments later. Her professional smile was gone, replaced by a look of crisp efficiency. Emma had clearly given her a quick briefing. Natalie's eyes took in the scene, the couple in the wrong seats. Alara, standing calmly in the aisle, the phones recording everything. "Mr. and Mrs. Ashford." Natalie said, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "I'm Natalie Porter, lead flight attendant. I understand there's some confusion about the seating." "There's no confusion." Victoria crossed her arms. "We're not moving." Natalie's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, your assigned seats are 3C and 3D. Dr. Mitchell's assigned seat is 2A. We have a full flight and the manifest is final. I need you and Mr. Ashford to move to your assigned seats now so we can complete boarding and depart on time." And I said no. Victoria leaned back in the seat, making herself comfortable. What are you going to do about it? Throw platinum members off the plane? She laughed. I don't think so. My husband's company spends millions with this airline. She turned to Richard for confirmation. Richard nodded. That's right. We know people. High up. Very high up. He pulled out his phone. I can have your CEO on the line in 30 seconds if you'd like. Natalie didn't blink. Sir, if you'd like to call anyone, you're welcome to do so from the terminal. Because if you don't move to your assigned seats in the next 60 seconds, you'll be escorted off this aircraft. A few passengers actually applauded. Tyler, still recording, muttered into his phone, Holy shit, she's not backing down. Sophia's live stream hit 891 viewers. Comments were flooding in faster than she could read them. Where is this? What airline? Get their names. This is racism, plain and simple. Victoria's face flushed red. She looked around the cabin, seeing the phones. The staring faces, the complete lack of support. This is discrimination, she said, her voice getting shrill. You're taking her side because of what political correctness diversity quotas. Ma'am, Natalie said, her voice now ice cold. I'm taking the side of our seating manifest and federal aviation regulations. You have 30 seconds. Richard grabbed his wife's arm. Victoria, maybe we should just... Don't you dare. Victoria jerked her arm away. We are not being bullied by some... She paused, searching for a word that would sound acceptable but convey her meaning upstart, who thinks she can waltz into first class and demand special treatment. She doesn't need special treatment. The voice came from behind them. Rachel Torres, a 28-year-old flight attendant who'd been standing near the galley, stepped forward. Her voice was quiet but firm. She has her assigned seat. That's not special treatment. That's just treatment. Equal treatment. Victoria whirled on her. Who asked you? Rachel didn't back down. I'm asking me. I work here. I see this happen. And I'm tired of seeing it. The cabin had gone completely silent except for the ventilation system. Natalie pulled out a small radio from her belt. Captain Reynolds. This is Natalie in first class. I need you at the forward door. We have passengers refusing to comply with crew instructions and creating a disturbance. The invocation of the captain's name was the final escalation. Victoria looked genuinely shocked. You can't be serious. Extremely serious, ma'am. The cockpit door opened with a metallic click that echoed through the silent cabin. Captain James Reynolds emerged. He was 52, with silver at his temples and the bearing of someone who'd spent 30 years in military and commercial aviation. He wore his uniform with the kind of precision that made it clear he took every aspect of his job seriously. When he entered the first-class cabin, the atmosphere shifted immediately. This wasn't a flight attendant they could bully or a gate agent they could wear down. This was the ultimate authority, the person who decided whether this plane moved or stayed put. What's the situation? His voice was a low baritone that cut through tension like a knife. Natalie stood straighter. Captain, we have Mr. and Mrs. Ashford in seats 2A and 2B. Their assigned seats are 3C and 3D. Seat 2A is assigned to Dr. Mitchell. The Ashfords are refusing to move and have been verbally abusive to both Dr. Mitchell and crew members. Captain Reynolds turned his gaze to the couple. His eyes were the kind of blue that seemed to see through excuses. Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, I'm Captain Reynolds. I understand you're in the incorrect seats. This is ridiculous, Richard started, but his bravado was shrinking under the captain's stare. It's a simple misunderstanding. This woman can sit in our other seats. Why are we making this complicated? It becomes complicated when passengers refuse lawful instructions from flight crew, Reynolds said. His voice was clipped precise. Aircraft weight and balance is a critical safety issue. Seat assignments are part of that calculation. The manifest is a legal document. The manifest says Dr. Mitchell is in 2A. For the final time, I am instructing you to move to your assigned seats. There was no room for negotiation in his tone. Victoria's hand clutched Richard's arm. Richard, just let it go, she whispered urgently. Let's just move. but Richard was too deep in his wounded pride. "I'm not being ordered around like a child," he said loudly. "I demand to speak to your supervisor." Captain Reynolds' expression didn't change. "Sir, on this aircraft, I am the supervisor. There is no one above my authority. You have two choices. Move to seat 3C and 3D immediately, or you and your wife will be escorted off my aircraft by airport security. You have 10 seconds to decide." The threat of police, of being removed in front of hundreds of cameras, finally penetrated. Richard's face went through several colors. "Fine," he spat. He started unbuckling his seatbelt with jerky, aggressive movements. "Worst customer service I've ever experienced." Victoria stood reluctantly, her perfect composure cracking. She looked at Alara with pure venom. "I hope you're happy." Alara said nothing. Her face was serene, unreadable. As the Ashfords gathered their things, Victoria yanking her Louis Vuitton bag from the overhead with such force the bin door bounced back open, they muttered insults under their breath. Richard bumped into Alara's shoulder as he passed, not quite hard enough to be assault, but hard enough to be deliberate. Tyler captured it all. Sophia's live stream was up to 1,647 viewers. Natalie turned to Alara with an apologetic smile that seemed genuinely pained. "Dr. Mitchell, I am so sorry you experienced that. Please take your seat. Can I get you that champagne now? I think you've more than earned it." "Thank you, Natalie." Alara finally stepped forward, sliding her briefcase under the seat ahead of her. She sank into the cream leather of seat 2, the seat she'd paid for, the seat she'd been assigned, the seat that was always hers. The cabin crew resumed boarding with renewed efficiency. Other passengers filed past, some offering Alara small nods of solidarity, others pointedly looking away. The heavy door sealed with a pneumatic hiss. The jet bridge retracted. A sense of normalcy began to return. Captain Reynolds' voice came over the intercom, smooth and reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We apologize for the brief departure delay. We're now cleared for pushback. Our flight time to London Heathrow will be 7 hours and 12 minutes. We'll be cruising at 41,000 feet with favorable winds. Should be a smooth ride across the Atlantic." Alara accepted the glass of champagne from Natalie, took a sip of the crisp, cold liquid, and felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. It was over. An ugly, unnecessary incident. But it was over. The engines began their deep, powerful spool-up. The plane pushed back from the gate, that familiar backward lurch, then the slow, deliberate taxi toward the runway. Alara gazed out her window, watching the ground crew fade into the distance. The lights of JFK twinkled in the early evening darkness. Other planes lined up ahead of them, a queue of metal birds waiting their turn to fly. Then, just as they were making the final turn toward the main runway, the engine suddenly spooled down. The powerful hum dropped to an unsettling quiet. The aircraft slowed, then stopped completely, sitting motionless on the vast expanse of taxiway. A moment of confused silence passed through the cabin. Then the intercom crackled to life. It was Captain Reynolds, but his voice had lost its smooth reassurance. Now it was tight serious, laced with concern. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I apologize, but we're seeing a maintenance flag on our primary auxiliary power unit. We're required to hold position while we consult with ground maintenance. I'll update you as soon as I have more information." A collective groan rippled through first class. Behind Alara from row 3, she heard Victoria's voice, sharp and loud. "Unbelievable. First that whole fiasco. Now this. This is the flight from hell." Alara closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the seat. A maintenance delay. That could be anything from 30 minutes to 3 hours. Her breakfast meeting with the NHS team was scheduled for 9 a.m. London time. If they were significantly delayed, if they missed the takeoff window, if they had to deplane and wait for a new aircraft. She pulled out her phone and fired off a text to David. Maintenance issue on 627. May be delayed. Start contingency planning for remote signing if we miss the meeting window. His response came back immediately. On it. Minutes crawled by. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, conserving power. Flight attendants moved through the aisles with practiced calm, but Ilara could see the worry in their eyes. 15 minutes, 20, 30. Finally, Captain Reynolds's voice returned. His news was not good. Folks, I'm afraid I have unfortunate news. The issue with the APU is more serious than initially assessed. It involves a critical component failure in the cryogenic flow regulation system. To be clear, we are not cleared for transatlantic flight. We're being instructed to return to the gate. Flight 627 is grounded until repairs can be completed. The cabin erupted in frustrated noise. Voices overlapping phones being pulled out. People calling assistants and colleagues and family members with the bad news. Canceled meetings, missed connections, ruined plans. From row 3, Victoria's voice rose above the others. This is unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. Richard, get the airline on the phone. We need to be rebooked immediately. Ilara sat very still, processing the implications. Grounded, not delayed. Grounded. That meant hours at minimum. Possibly the entire flight canceled. She looked at her watch. 7:47 p.m. The next skybound flight to London was tomorrow at 2 p.m. There was a British Airways red-eye at 11 p.m., but if hundreds of passengers from this flight tried to rebook it, would be chaos. She opened her laptop, pulling up the NHS contract. Maybe they could do the signing remotely. Video conference. Digital signatures. It wouldn't have the same gravitas, the same symbolic weight, but it would be legal. It would work. But as the plane slowly taxied back toward the gate, as the frustrated voices around her grew louder as Victoria Ashford's complaints became increasingly shrill, Ilara had no idea that the broken machinery in the belly of this aircraft was about to intersect with her life in a way no one could have possibly imagined. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor, and it was about to deliver the punchline. The walk back to the gate felt longer than the taxi out. Passengers sat in frustrated silence or made hurried phone calls. The cabin crew maintained professional faces, but their movements were tense. They'd been through mechanical delays before, but the combination of the earlier seating confrontation and now this major failure had everyone on edge. When the aircraft door finally opened and the jet bridge reconnected with a heavy thunk, the announcement came swiftly. Ladies and gentlemen, due to the maintenance issue, all passengers will need to deplane. Please proceed to the gate area where our customer service team will provide updates and rebooking options. We sincerely apologize for this inconvenience. The exodus began. First class emptied first, as always. Victoria Ashford swept past Ilara without a glance, her cream suit somehow still immaculate despite the chaos, her Louis Vuitton bag clutched like a weapon. Richard followed, his face dark with anger, phone already pressed to his ear. "Take your time, Dr. Mitchell," Natalie said quietly as Ilara gathered her things. "And again, I'm so sorry about earlier." "You handled it perfectly," Ilara replied. "Thank you for standing firm." Rachel Torres appeared at Natalie's shoulder. "Dr. Mitchell, I just wanted to say—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "What happened to you happens more than people know. Thank you for not backing down." Ilara met the younger woman's eyes. Something passed between them, a moment of recognition. "You see it often." Rachel nodded. "Too often. But nobody usually—" She trailed off. "Usually they take the other seat." Rachel's silence was answer enough. Ilara touched her arm briefly. "Keep watching. Keep speaking up when you can." Then she walked off the plane into the chaos of Terminal 5. The gate area had transformed into a storm of frustrated humanity. The customer service desk was already besieged by angry passengers waving boarding passes and demanding immediate solutions. The line snaked back 30 people deep. Voices rose and fell in waves of complaint. Alara bypassed it entirely. Her status with Skybound, she flew first class internationally at least twice a month, gave her access to the executive services lounge on the upper level. She headed for the escalator, her heels clicking on the polished floor, her mind already shifting into problem-solving mode. The executive services lounge was a different world. Quiet, spacious, leather armchairs and soft lighting, and the kind of hush that came with truly expensive amenities. She found a corner workstation, opened her laptop, and began executing her backup plan. First, a video call with David and her contracts attorney, Michelle Park. Michelle, what are our options for remote signing? Michelle's face on the screen was thoughtful. Legally, we're fine with digital signatures. The NHS team has already signed off on that option if needed. But Alara, you know as well as I do that this deal has symbolic weight. The first major European health service contract. First woman CEO in the biotech space to crack this market. The press conference tomorrow was supposed to... I know. Alara cut her off gently. But a signed contract is better than a delayed one. Let's set up the remote option. David, can you reach out to the NHS team? See if we can move the meeting to video conference still at 9 a.m. their time, but from here on it. David confirmed. While they worked, Alara ordered a black coffee and allowed herself a moment to simply sit. The adrenaline from the earlier confrontation had faded, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness she recognized. This wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. But God, she was tired of fighting for space she'd already earned. Across the lounge, she noticed a familiar flash of cream fabric. Victoria Ashford had apparently also had the status to access this space. She and Richard sat at a table near the windows, Victoria's voice carrying despite the lounge's sound-dampening design. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Victoria was saying to the lounge manager, a patient-looking man in a vest. "We were treated like criminals on that flight. Harassed, humiliated. For what? A simple seating mix-up. And now the plane is broken?" She laughed bitterly. "This airline is falling apart." The lounge manager nodded sympathetically. Clearly, practiced at absorbing complaints. "I understand your frustration. Mrs. Ashford, let me see what rebooking options I can find for you." "Not economy," Victoria snapped. "We fly first class. Only first class." "Of course, ma'am." Alara turned back to her laptop, tuning them out. She had more important things to focus on than the wounded pride of people who'd tried to steal her seat. But then Victoria's voice carried again, this time in a lower tone. Alara wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the acoustics of the lounge brought the words to her clearly. "Did you see who that was?" Victoria was saying to Richard. "On the plane. The woman with our seat." Richard's response was dismissive. "Some entitled passenger who made a scene. Who cares? No, you don't understand." Victoria's voice had a strange quality, now something between realization and dread. I saw her on her laptop. Novatech Cryogenics. That logo. "Richard, that was Alara Mitchell." Richard looked up sharply. "What?" "That was Dr. Alara Mitchell, the CEO of Novatech." She paused. "The company that just stole the NHS contract from us." The silence that followed was heavy. Alara kept her eyes on her screen, but every sense was suddenly alert. "You're sure?" Richard's voice was quieter now. "I saw her picture in the Forbes profile 2 weeks ago. 30 under 40 or whatever, rising biotech stars. That was her." Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper, but Alara's ears were sharp. "Oh, God. Richard, do you realize what we just—" "We didn't do anything wrong," Richard interrupted. "It was a seating mix-up, that's all." But Victoria wasn't listening. She was staring across the lounge directly at Alara, her face pale beneath her perfect makeup. Alara met her gaze for exactly 2 seconds, then returned to her work. Let her stew in it. Meanwhile, in a very different part of JFK, inside the operations center for skybound airlines, Brandon Griffin was having the worst night of his career. The operations center was a controlled chaos of monitors, radio chatter, and stressed-out managers trying to minimize the damage from Flight 627's failure. Brandon, 44 years old and responsible for keeping Skybound's JFK hub running smoothly, was on a conference call with the maintenance chief engineer and the procurement team. "Give it to me in plain English," Frank Brandon said, pinching the bridge of his nose. He was staring at a screen showing Flight 627's passenger manifest and already calculating the astronomical cost of rebooking 320 people. Frank's voice crackled over the speakerphone. "It's the cryogenic flow regulator on the APU. Complete failure. The component that manages temperature exchange in the auxiliary power unit. Without it, the plane can't maintain safe operating temperatures for a transatlantic flight. It's a safety hard stop. We can't fix it. We have to replace it." "Fine. How long?" "That's the problem. This is a specialized part. We don't stock it. I've checked our inventory at our 3 maintenance facilities. 0. I've checked our partner airlines. 0. There are only 3 of these components in all of North America." Brandon felt his stomach sink. 3. In the entire continent, it's a proprietary design. Only one manufacturer makes them. There's one spare in Seattle, one in Montreal, and one at the manufacturer's facility in New Jersey. Brandon felt a flicker of hope. New Jersey. That's an hour away. Get a courier. Get the part here. We can have mechanics install it and get this flight out by midnight. Long delay, but not a cancellation. It'll save us millions. Working on it, the procurement officer chimed in over the call. "But there's an issue." "Of course there is," Brandon muttered. "What? The manufacturer is a specialty biotech firm. They don't have a 24-hour parts depot like Boeing or Airbus. Their facility is closed for the evening, and the part is held in a secure, climate-controlled laboratory. We can't just send a courier. We need executive authorization from the company to release it for emergency transport. So get me the CEO on the phone," Brandon said. "Tell them it's an AOG aircraft on ground emergency. They'll understand the urgency." "Who's the company?" There was a pause in the sound of typing. "The company is Novatech Cryogenics." Brandon froze. The name was familiar, very recently familiar. Where had he just... His eyes flicked to the other monitor on his desk. The incident report that Natalie Porter had filed from Flight 627 less than 2 hours ago. He'd skimmed it during the boarding process. Passenger conflict, seating dispute, disruptive passengers' names Ashford, and the passenger who'd been harassed. Brandon pulled up the full passenger manifest. His eyes scanned the first-class cabin list. Seat 2, A. Mitchell Ilara. Doctor. His hands moved on autopilot, pulling up a second window. Google search. Novatech Cryogenics CEO. The first result showed a professional headshot and a bio. Founder and CEO, Dr. Ilara Mitchell, 41. He stared at the screen. Then he pulled up the incident report again, reading Natalie's detailed account. Passengers, Victoria and Richard Ashford, refused to vacate incorrectly occupied seat 2A. Dr. Ilara Mitchell subjected to dismissive and racially biased comments. Ashford's repeatedly questioned her right to occupy first-class seating. Captain Reynolds required to intervene. Situation resolved with Ashford's move to correct seats. Brandon's blood ran cold. The woman they'd allowed to be harassed, humiliated, and questioned in front of an entire cabin full of witnesses and cameras. The woman who'd had to call the captain just to sit in a seat she'd paid for. The woman who'd been treated like an intruder in a space she had every right to occupy. That woman was the only person in the world who could authorize the release of the one component needed to get a $300 million aircraft off the ground and 320 passengers to their destinations. The cosmic irony was so complete, it was almost beautiful. Almost. Brandon grabbed his radio. Operations to all supervisors. I need someone to locate Dr. Ilara Mitchell. Passenger from Flight 627. She's somewhere in this terminal. Find her and bring her to me at operations. And for God's sake, be respectful. Sir, one of the team members asked what's going on. Brandon stared at the screen at the photo of Dr. Mitchell with her calm, intelligent eyes. Karma, he said quietly. Karma is what's going on. Sophia Ramirez had finished her live stream of the seat confrontation and was now in the main terminal editing the video for her YouTube channel when her phone started exploding with notifications. Her live stream clip had been downloaded and reposted across Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok. The hashtag #SeatWhileBlack was trending. Multiple news outlets had reached out for permission to use her footage. She sat in a Starbucks near the gate area watching the view count climb. 47,000 views, 52,000, 68,000. Her DMs were flooded, people asking for more information, others sharing their own stories of discrimination on airlines. And then one message caught her eye. It was from a tech blogger she followed. Sophia, just FYI, someone identified the woman in the cream suit. Victoria Ashford, Sr., VP at Biomedica Pharmaceuticals. Her LinkedIn is blowing up. Might want to check it out. Sophia switched to LinkedIn. Sure enough, Victoria Ashford's profile was being bombarded with comments. People tagging Biomedica's corporate account, demanding statements, calling for her termination. The story was spiraling beyond a simple airline incident. It was becoming a case study in corporate behavior, in entitled privilege, in the casual racism that still permeated spaces that prided themselves on being progressive. Tyler Brennan, meanwhile, had moved to Twitter, where his thread documenting the incident had been retweeted over 15,000 times. He sat in the executive lounge, his press credentials gave him access, and continued updating. Update Flight 627 grounded due to mechanical failure, passengers being rebooked. The woman denied her seat, now identified as Dr. Ilara Mitchell, CEO of Novatech. Cryogenics handled the entire situation with grace while being harassed. The couple who took her seat, Victoria and Richard Ashford of Biomedica Pharma, showed their true colors. The replies were swift and merciless. Biomedica needs to fire her immediately. This is why diversity training doesn't work. These people never face consequences. Someone start a petition. This can't be ignored. A petition appeared on change.org within 30 minutes. Demand Biomedica Pharmaceuticals terminate Victoria Ashford for racist behavior. It had 3,000 signatures in the first hour. Back in the operations center, Brandon Griffin was frantically making calls. He'd located Dr. Mitchell in the executive services lounge and was now coordinating with his boss, the VP of Operations, Christine Park, who was on an emergency conference call. Christine, I need you to understand the optics here. Brandon said, his voice tight. This passenger was subjected to harassment and racial profiling on our aircraft less than 2 hours ago. The incident was recorded by multiple passengers and is currently viral on social media. And now we're asking her for a massive favor. Christine's voice came through crisp and clear. Then we don't ask. We grovel, and we make it right. What does she need? I haven't approached her yet, Brandon admitted. I wanted your authorization first. You have it. Whatever it takes within reason. And Brandon, make sure legal knows this is happening. We may need to move quickly on other measures. Understood. Brandon took a breath, straightened his tie, and headed for the executive lounge. He found Dr. Mitchell exactly where the gate agent had described. She was in a corner workstation laptop, open phone to her ear, looking every inch the CEO she was. She was speaking in a calm, measured tone about contract clauses and digital signature verification. The picture of professional competence. Brandon waited until she finished her call, then approached with all the deference of a man who knew he was interrupting someone important. Dr. Mitchell. She looked up. Her eyes registered recognition he was wearing his operations manager badge, but her expression remained neutral. Yes. May I sit? She gestured to the chair across from her. You have 2 minutes. Brandon sat folding his hands on the table. Dr. Mitchell. I'm Brandon Griffin, Operations Manager for Skybound's JFK Hub. First, I need to offer you my most sincere and profound apology for what you experienced on Flight 627 this evening. What happened was completely unacceptable. The crew reported the incident, and we will be taking action. Alara's eyebrow raised slightly. What kind of action? That's partly why I'm here. But first, I need to explain our current situation. He took a breath. As you know, Flight 627 is grounded due to a critical mechanical failure. Specifically, a component called a cryogenic flow regulator on the auxiliary power unit has failed. He watched her face carefully. She was listening, processing, but giving nothing away. Our engineers have determined that this component must be replaced before the aircraft can safely complete a transatlantic flight. We've sourced a spare part from the manufacturer. He paused. That manufacturer is your company, Novatech Cryogenics. For the first time, Alara's professional mask showed a crack. Her eyes widened fractionally. The pieces were clicking into place. Brandon pressed on. The component is located at your Newark facility. We need executive authorization to access it for emergency transport and installation. Without your approval, Dr. Mitchell, we cannot get this aircraft back in service, which means 320 passengers, many with critical business and family obligations, will be stranded indefinitely. He leaned forward slightly. Dr. Mitchell, we are at your mercy. The silence stretched. Across the lounge, Brandon could see Victoria Ashford watching them. Her face pale, her hand gripping Richard's arm. Alara steepled her fingers. At your mercy. She repeated the phrase, slowly. That's an interesting position to be in, Mr. Griffin. I recognize the irony, ma'am, and the injustice of asking you for help after what you endured. Alara leaned back in her chair. She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant clearly, thinking through multiple angles at once. When she spoke, her voice was crisp and decisive. Mr. Griffin, I'm a problem solver. It's what I do. You clearly have a problem. I can solve it, but I have conditions. Brandon nodded quickly. Anything reasonable, ma'am? Alara held up one finger. First, the passengers who caused the disturbance, Victoria and Richard Ashford, will be permanently banned from Skybound Airlines. The ban is effective immediately, and I want written confirmation before I make any calls. Brandon didn't hesitate. Done. I'll have it sent to your email within 10 minutes. Second, she held up another finger. Skybound will make a donation of $300,000 to Black Girls Code. The transfer will be completed within 1 hour, and I want the receipt. Brandon swallowed. That was a substantial sum, but given the cost of the grounded aircraft, it was nothing. Consider it done. Alara stood. And third, Mr. Griffin, my final condition isn't for the airline, it's for her. She turned and began walking across the lounge. Brandon, confused, stood and followed. Every head in the lounge turned as Dr. Alara Mitchell walked directly toward the table where Victoria and Richard Ashford sat frozen in their seats. Victoria's face had gone from pale to gray. Her perfect blonde waves suddenly looked like a mask that was slipping. Richard tried to stand, but his legs didn't seem to cooperate. Alara stopped in front of their table. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but carried across the suddenly silent lounge. My final condition. Mr. Griffin, she said without taking her eyes off Victoria, is a public one. I require a full, unequivocal apology. Not just to me, but to the crew your behavior disrespected and the passengers whose time you wasted with your entitlement. She took a step closer to Victoria's table. I want Mrs. Ashford to stand up right here, right now, and admit that her behavior was entitled racist and completely unacceptable. She will state clearly that she was in the wrong seat, that I was in the correct seat, and that her assumptions about who belongs in first class were based on nothing but prejudice. Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ilara's voice dropped lower but somehow became more intense. You see, Mr. Griffin, some things that break are mechanical, but others are matters of character, and I find that the latter require a much more direct repair. The lounge was completely silent. Victoria looked around desperately, at Richard, who had shrunk into his chair, at the other passengers who were watching with a mixture of anticipation and judgment, at her phone, which was buzzing with what she knew were messages about the viral video. She had a choice: refuse and be the person who single-handedly stranded 320 people out of pure spite, or acquiesce and face public humiliation more complete than anything she'd ever experienced. The power wasn't just reversed, it was absolute. While Victoria struggled with her decision, Ilara stood perfectly still, and a memory surfaced unbidden. She was 26 again, standing in a hotel lobby in Boston at 2 a.m., exhausted from a red-eye flight. The Boston Plaza Hotel. She'd been invited to present her graduate research at a biotechnology conference. It was her first major academic presentation, the kind of opportunity that could launch a career. She'd booked a room 3 weeks in advance, paid with her credit card, received a confirmation email. But when she'd walked through the revolving doors, pulling a small, rolling suitcase, wearing jeans and a university hoodie, because she'd planned to sleep immediately and change in the morning, the clerk behind the marble desk had looked at her with the same expression Victoria Ashford would give her 15 years later. "Can I help you?" The clerk was white male, probably in his 40s. His voice was polite, but his eyes were assessing. "I have a reservation. Hayes." Ilara Hayes. He'd typed slowly on his keyboard. I'm not seeing anything. I have a confirmation number." She'd pulled out her phone, showed him the email. He'd barely glanced at it. "The system's not showing your reservation, miss." "But I paid already. I have the charge on my credit card. The system doesn't show it." He'd shrugged as if this explained everything. "You'll need to come back in the morning when the manager is here. She can look into it." Ilara had stared at him, understanding exactly what was happening but too exhausted to fight. "It's 2 a.m. I don't have anywhere else to go. I'm sorry, but without verification I can't just give you a room. I have verification. It's right here. Not in our system, you don't." "Look, miss," he'd said, his tone becoming impatient, "I can't override the manager's authority. Come back at 9 a.m. She'd stood there for another 5 minutes trying different approaches, showing him her credit card statement, offering to pay again, asking to speak to anyone else on duty. Nothing worked. Finally, she'd walked back through those revolving doors, pulled her suitcase to her rental car in the parking garage, and sat in the driver's seat in the dark. She hadn't cried. Even then, she'd known that tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she'd opened her laptop connected to the hotel's parking lot Wi-Fi and started working. But not on her presentation for the conference. She'd opened a blank document and titled it Business Plan, Hayes Biotech Solutions. If they won't see me, she'd thought I'll build something they can't function without. The idea had germinated during her PhD research. She'd been working with cryogenic preservation systems, studying how to maintain stable temperatures in extreme conditions. The applications were endless: medical transport, aviation systems, deep-sea equipment, anywhere that precise temperature control meant the difference between success and catastrophic failure. The existing technology was clunky, expensive, and often unreliable. She'd seen the gap in the market. She had the technical knowledge. What she needed was the will to step outside academia and into the business world. That night in the car, wrapped in her jacket, because the Boston November cold seeped through the windows, she'd written the outline. What would eventually become Novatech Cryogenics started as a 15-page document written in a parking garage by a woman who'd been refused a hotel room she'd already paid for. The next morning, she'd given her presentation at the conference. She'd been brilliant, clear, compelling, innovative. 3 venture capital firms had asked for her contact information. 2 weeks later, she'd filed the paperwork for her company. 6 months later, she had her first patent. 3 years later, Novatech had its first major contract with a medical transport company. And 15 years later, she was standing in an airport lounge about to extract an apology from a woman who'd tried to do to her exactly what that hotel clerk had done. The same dismissal, the same assumption, the same automatic conclusion that she didn't belong. But this time, Alara wasn't 26 and exhausted and alone. This time, she held all the cards. The memory faded. She was back in the present, watching Victoria Ashford's internal struggle play out across her face. I built this, Alara thought. I built Novatech so that I would never again be powerless in moments like these, so that I would have leverage, so that I would have value that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. And now the universe had delivered a moment of such perfect poetic justice that it almost felt scripted. Victoria finally moved. She pushed her chair back and stood on shaking legs. Her husband reached for her hand, but she pulled away. This was hers to do alone. The lounge had filled up in the last few minutes. Word had spread somehow, maybe through staff, maybe through passengers who'd been on the flight, that something significant was happening. People stood near the edges watching. A few had phones out again. Sophia Ramirez had somehow gotten access to the executive lounge and was recording. Tyler Brennan was doing the same. The viral moment was about to have a sequel. Victoria cleared her throat. The sound was dry, painful. "My name is Victoria Ashford," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Senior Vice President at Biomedica Pharmaceuticals." She paused, took a shaky breath. "Earlier this evening on Flight 627, I took a seat that wasn't assigned to me. Seat 2A. Dr. Alara Mitchell had the correct seat. I refused to move when asked. I questioned her boarding pass. I questioned her right to be in first class. I was rude to her and to the flight crew." Another pause. Her hands were trembling. "My behavior was based on racist assumptions. I looked at Dr. Mitchell and decided she didn't belong in first class. That decision had nothing to do with seating assignments or airline policy. It was prejudice, pure prejudice." Victoria's voice cracked. "I apologize to Dr. Mitchell. I apologize to Captain Reynolds and his crew. I apologize to everyone on that flight who had to witness my behavior. I was wrong, completely wrong." She looked directly at Alara for the first time. "I'm sorry." Then she collapsed back into her chair, her perfect posture finally broken. The lounge erupted in whispers. Sophia's live stream exploded with comments. Tyler was already typing his update. Alara gave a single sharp nod to Brandon Griffin. "Thank you, Mr. Griffin. I believe my conditions have been met." She pulled out her phone, walked back to her workstation, and made a call. "David, this is Alara. I need you to authorize an emergency release for a cryogenic flow regulator from the Newark facility. Authorization code Sierra Tango, November 47, Echo. A skybound courier will arrive in 30 minutes. Expedite it." Just like that, the machinery of commerce and logistics whirred back to life. Brandon was already on his radio, coordinating the courier, updating the maintenance team, recalculating the departure timeline. Within minutes, Alara's phone buzzed twice. The first email was from Skybound's legal department, formal confirmation that Victoria and Richard Ashford were permanently banned from all Skybound flights. The second was a transfer receipt showing $300,000 sent to Black Girls Code. The airline, whatever else could be said about them, moved quickly when motivated. An announcement echoed through the terminal. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an update on Flight 627 to London. The required part has been sourced. The flight will be reboarding in approximately 90 minutes. Please monitor the departure boards for gate information." A wave of relief passed through the waiting passengers. But for Victoria and Richard Ashford, the ordeal was just beginning. Two Port Authority police officers, accompanied by a skybound security supervisor, approached the Ashfords' table. The lounge, which had been buzzing with conversation after Victoria's forced apology, fell silent again. "Mr. and Mrs. Ashford," the lead officer asked. His voice was professional neutral. "We need you to come with us." Richard stood quickly, his face flushing. "What is this about your travel with Skybound Airlines has been terminated?" the security supervisor said, consulting a tablet. "You're no longer welcome on airline property. We'll escort you to collect your luggage from the aircraft, and then you'll need to leave the terminal." "You can't do this," Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew exactly why this was happening. Victoria said nothing. She stood mechanically, picked up her handbag, and walked toward the exit without looking at anyone. The walk through the terminal was a modern walk of shame. Other passengers recognized them from the flight or from the viral videos that were still spreading. Whispers followed them, phones lifted to record their escort by police. One passenger, an older woman with silver hair, spoke loud enough for them to hear. About time, airlines started enforcing consequences. Good riddance. They reached the aircraft where their bags were retrieved from the cargo hold. The entire process took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of being escorted through crowds, past gates, past duty-free shops where people stopped shopping to stare. When they finally reached the exit from the secure area, the lead officer spoke one final time. "Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, you're free to leave. But just so you know, your names have been added to the no-fly list for Skybound. You'll need to make alternative arrangements with other carriers for your future travel." Richard nodded stiffly. He couldn't look the officer in the eye. They walked out into the main terminal, and that's when Richard's phone started buzzing. Constantly. Message after message. Email after email. He looked at the screen. His face went from red to white in seconds. The first email was from his CEO at Biomedica Pharmaceuticals. Subject line urgent. "Call me immediately." He opened it with shaking hands. "Richard, I've been made aware of an incident involving you and Victoria at JFK Airport this evening. A video of Victoria's behavior on Flight 627 has gone viral and is being shared across social media. Our corporate communications team has been fielding calls from journalists for the past hour. I need you both to call me immediately. Do not make any public statements. Do not post on social media. Call me. Charles Brennan, CEO, Biomedica Pharmaceuticals." The second email was from Biomedica's chief legal officer. The subject, immediate administrative leave. The third was from Human Resources. Richard's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. Victoria was staring at her own phone, her face completely bloodless. "Richard," she whispered, "Biomedica's Twitter mentions. Look at them." He opened the app. The company's official account was being bombarded. Thousands of tweets, all angry, all demanding action. At Biomedica Pharma, one of your SVPs was caught on video being racist to a black woman on at Skybound Air. Victoria Ashford. When will you fire her? #accountability matters at Biomedica Pharma claims to support diversity, but employs Victoria Ashford, who was filmed questioning if a black CEO belonged in first class. Do better. Cool that. At Biomedica Pharma lets their executives treat black professionals like they don't belong in the same spaces. Real inclusive guys. #boycott Biomedica. The tweet count kept rising. 2,000, 5,000, 8,000. Biomedica's stock price, displayed on a financial news app Richard had open, showed a 2.7% drop in after-hours trading. The headline, "Biomedica stock falls following viral video of executives' racist behavior." "We need to get out of here," Victoria said. Her voice was hollow. "We need to get home." They made their way to the taxi stand. Neither spoke. In the cab, heading back to their home in Connecticut, Victoria finally broke down. Quiet tears that ruined her perfect makeup, smearing mascara down her cheeks. "How did this happen?" she whispered. How did everything fall apart so fast? Richard had no answer, because the truth that they'd brought this entirely upon themselves through arrogance and prejudice was too painful to speak aloud. Back in the executive lounge, Alara was finishing her remote call with the NHS team. They'd agreed to proceed with the video signing as a backup, but there was still hope she'd make the morning flight if the repairs went quickly. Dr. Mitchell, one of the NHS board members, said over the video call, "We've been seeing some unusual social media activity this evening. Something about an airline incident." Alara smiled slightly. "Just a minor delay. It's being handled." "Good, good. Well, we're looking forward to meeting you in person tomorrow, assuming the flight situation resolves. This partnership is going to change lives, Dr. Mitchell." Truly. After the call ended, Brandon Griffin approached her table one more time. "Dr. Mitchell, I have an update. The courier has retrieved the component from your facility. Our mechanics estimate installation will take approximately 60 minutes. We should be ready for reboarding around 10:30 p.m., with a new departure time of 11 p.m. Alara nodded. "That works for my schedule. I'll still make the morning meeting." Brandon hesitated. "Dr. Mitchell, I know I've said this already, but thank you. For your grace, for your help, for everything." "Mr. Griffin, Alara said I didn't do this for the airline. I did it for the 320 people who had nothing to do with what happened earlier. They deserve to get home to their meetings, to their families. That's what matters." "Still," Brandon said, "you could have walked away. Many people would have. Many people have had to." Alara replied quietly, "I just happened to be in a position where I didn't have to." "That's not virtue, Mr. Griffin. That's just luck. Luck and 15 years of hard work that put me in a position to have leverage when I needed it." She paused. "But I'll tell you what I do want. I want this incident reported properly. I want training for your staff. I want anonymous reporting systems for passengers who experience discrimination. I want you to look at your complaint records and see if this is a pattern. Because I promise you, Mr. Griffin, I wasn't the first. I was just the first with a camera audience and a component you needed." Brandon nodded seriously. "You're right, and I'll personally ensure those changes are made. I'll send you a follow-up in 30 days with our progress." "Good." Alara stood extending her hand. "Then I think we're done here." They shook hands and Brandon walked away, already making notes on his phone about policy changes and training programs. Rachel Torres, the flight attendant who'd spoken up during the original incident, had been watching from near the lounge entrance. She approached Alara cautiously. "Dr. Mitchell, I don't want to bother you, but I wanted to thank you." Alara turned. "For what?" "For not backing down." Rachel's voice was quiet but intense. "I've worked for Skybound for 3 years. I've seen incidents like this 6, maybe 7 times. Passengers of color being questioned, being treated differently, being made to feel like they're suspicious just for existing in first class. And every time I've reported it, nothing happens. HR takes a statement. Management says they'll look into it. And then nothing changes." She looked directly at Alara. "You changed something tonight, not just for you, for everyone who comes after." Alara studied the younger woman. "You kept records of the other incidents." Rachel nodded. "I document everything. Dates, passenger names, when I can get them, what was said, how it was handled. I kept hoping that eventually someone would listen." Alara pulled out her phone. "What's your email? I'm going to connect you with Brandon Griffin directly." "You're going to be part of the solution, Rachel. Those records you kept, they're evidence. They're proof that this is bigger than one incident, and they're going to drive real change." Rachel's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" Alara typed a quick email to Brandon, copying Rachel. "And, Rachel, keep doing what you're doing. Speaking up. Documenting. The people who see the problems are the ones who have to help fix them. Rachel blinked back tears. "Thank you, Dr. Mitchell." "Thank you for being brave enough to speak," Alara replied. As Rachel walked away, Alara returned to her workstation. She had 90 minutes until reboarding. She spent them working, answering emails, reviewing technical specifications for a different project, talking to her team about operations logistics for the expanded NHS contract. This was who she was, not a victim, not someone defined by what others tried to do to her, but a CEO, a scientist, a builder of things that mattered. And when the announcement came that Flight 627 was ready for reboarding, she gathered her things with the same calm efficiency she'd had hours ago and walked back toward the gate. This time, she knew the flight would be very different. The operations center at JFK was finally breathing easier. Brandon Griffin stood in front of a wall of monitors showing flight statuses, weather patterns, and gate assignments. On one screen, he could see the maintenance crew at Gate 47 finishing the installation of the cryogenic flow regulator. Frank, the chief maintenance engineer, was on the radio. Component installed. Running diagnostic checks now. Should have full systems verification in 15 minutes. Brandon allowed himself a moment of relief. The disaster had been averted. Flight 627 would depart only 4 hours late instead of being canceled entirely. The cost to the airline was still substantial: passenger compensation, crew overtime, the emergency component procurement, but it was manageable. A cancellation would have been catastrophic. His phone buzzed. It was Christine Park, the VP of Operations. "Brandon, tell me where we are." "Component installed. Running final checks. We're green for an 11 p.m. departure." "Good." Christine's voice was crisp. "I'm sending legal to draft a comprehensive review of tonight's incident. The passenger complaint, the viral videos, the social media backlash. We need a complete picture." "Already started," Brandon confirmed. "Natalie Porter's report is detailed. We also have statements from 2 other flight attendants and Captain Reynolds." "What about the passengers who were removed, Victoria and Richard Ashford?" "Already escorted from the terminal. The lifetime ban is in our system. They're flagged across all our booking platforms. And the donation Dr. Mitchell requested processed. $300,000 to Black Girls Code. Receipt sent to Dr. Mitchell's email 35 minutes ago." Christine was quiet for a moment. "Brandon, I want you to understand something. What happened tonight could have destroyed us. A racial discrimination incident going viral while we're asking the victim for help. That's the kind of story that ends careers and tanks stock prices." "I understand, ma'am. Dr. Mitchell showed us grace we didn't deserve. But grace isn't enough. We need structural change. I want a full audit of passenger complaints from the last 3 years, specifically looking for patterns of discrimination, racial profiling, bias in how we handle disputes. I want it on my desk in 2 weeks." "Yes, ma'am. And Brandon, find out who else has been documenting problems like Rachel Torres, employees who've been trying to report issues. We need to listen to them. We need to empower them. Because the next time something like this happens, I want our staff to feel supported when they speak up." "Understood." Brandon made notes. "I'll coordinate with HR and legal. One more thing." Christine's voice softened slightly. "How did Dr. Mitchell seem when you spoke with her?" Brandon thought back to their conversation in the lounge. Calm, professional, focused. She didn't gloat. She didn't make us grovel more than necessary. She just laid out clear terms and expected them to be met. "That's leadership," Christine said. "We could learn from her." After the call ended, Brandon pulled up the viral videos on his own phone. He watched the seat confrontation from multiple angles. Tyler Brennan's recording from row 3, Sofia Ramirez's live stream, a third video from another passenger who'd posted to TikTok. Each time he watched, the injustice became clearer. Victoria Ashford's tone, Richard's dismissiveness, the way they'd automatically assumed Dr. Mitchell was the problem. The casual racism couched in polite language, and through it all, Dr. Mitchell's calm, never raising her voice. never losing her composure, simply insisting with quiet dignity on what was rightfully hers. Brandon had worked in airline operations for 22 years. He'd seen every kind of passenger conflict imaginable: drunk travelers, entitled celebrities, people having mental health crises, families fighting over seat assignments. But this was different. This was a window into something deeper, something that made him profoundly uncomfortable. How many other Dr. Mitchells had there been? How many times had passengers of color been questioned, doubted, challenged in ways that white passengers never experienced? How many had been too tired, too outnumbered, too afraid of making things worse to stand their ground? He thought about Rachel Torres quietly documenting incidents for 3 years, hoping someone would listen. He thought about Emma Lou, the young flight attendant who'd looked so frightened when she'd had to intervene in the dispute. He thought about the systems he'd helped maintain, the policies he'd enforced, and wondered what else they'd all been missing. His computer pinged. An email from Frank: full systems check complete. Aircraft cleared for service. Ready for passenger boarding. Brandon picked up his radio. All stations, this is operations. Flight 627 is cleared for reboarding. Gate 47. Departure time, 11 p.m. Let's get these passengers on their way. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He left the operations center and walked down to Gate 47 himself. He wanted to see the reboarding. He wanted to see Dr. Mitchell walk onto that plane. He needed to witness the end of this story with his own eyes. At Gate 47, the mood among passengers was a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The 4-hour delay had been frustrating, but at least they were finally getting on a plane. Many had spent the time in airport restaurants or shops. Others had found quiet corners to sleep. A few had managed to rebook on other airlines and were already gone. But 280 passengers remained ready to board. The gate agent's voice came over the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now ready to begin boarding Flight 627 to London Heathrow. We apologize for the extended delay and appreciate your patience. We'll be boarding first class and premium passengers first, followed by boarding groups 1 through 5. The first class line formed quickly. Alara joined it, her boarding pass in hand, her briefcase over her shoulder. She noticed other passengers glancing at her, some with recognition. A few nodded. One elderly woman smiled warmly. Tyler Brennan was behind her in line. Dr. Mitchell, he said quietly. I'm Tyler. I was in row 3 on the first boarding. I wanted to say thank you for handling that situation with such dignity, and I'm sorry you had to experience it at all. Alara turned. Thank you for recording it. Sometimes the only thing that creates accountability is evidence. It's already making a difference, Tyler said. Biomedica's stock is down. The company issued a statement saying they're conducting an investigation. There's a petition to fire Victoria Ashford that has over 20,000 signatures now. Alara's expression was unreadable. I don't take joy in anyone losing their job, but I do believe in consequences. And sometimes consequences are the only thing that creates change. Sophia Ramirez, the travel vlogger, was also nearby. Dr. Mitchell, she called out my live stream of the incident has been viewed over 200,000 times now. I just wanted you to know that people are standing with you. The response has been overwhelming. I appreciate that, Sophia, Alara said. But I hope people also remember all the others who face this and don't have cameras around, who don't have leverage, who just have to endure it quietly. Those are the people I'm thinking about tonight. The gate agent scanned Alara's boarding pass. Welcome back aboard, Dr. Mitchell. Have a wonderful flight. Alara walked down the jet bridge for the second time that evening, through the aircraft door where she was greeted by a sight that made her pause. Captain Reynolds stood at the entrance to the aircraft. Beside him was Natalie Porter, the lead flight attendant. Behind them, the rest of the cabin crew was lined up. Dr. Mitchell. Captain Reynolds said, extending his hand. I wanted to personally thank you, not just for helping us get this aircraft back in service, but for your grace and your strength earlier tonight. It was an honor to have you on board then, and it's an honor to have you on board now. Elara shook his hand firmly. Thank you for upholding your rules, Captain, for protecting passengers. That's what made the difference. She walked into the first-class cabin. The space looked exactly the same as it had hours earlier. Same cream leather seats, same soft lighting, same polished wood accents. But the atmosphere was entirely different. As she approached row 2, several passengers looked up. The man in seat 1D, a banking executive she recognized from the business press, gave her a respectful nod. The woman in 2F, an actress whose face Elara knew from British television, smiled warmly. Dr. Mitchell, the actress said in a posh British accent. That was absolutely brilliant. What you did, both standing your ground earlier and helping everyone get home tonight. Absolutely brilliant. Just doing what needed to be done, Elara replied. She slid into seat 2A, her seat, finally. The leather was cool against her back. The window offered a perfect view of the wing illuminated by the gate lights. She could see the maintenance crew doing final checks underneath the aircraft. Natalie appeared with a glass of champagne. Dr. Mitchell, this is with the airline's compliments and apologies. We've also upgraded your return flight to our premium suite class at no charge, and you'll find a personal note from our CEO in your seat packet. That's very kind, Natalie. Thank you. As other passengers filed in, the contrast with the earlier boarding was stark. No one challenged her presence. No one questioned whether she belonged. Instead, people treated her with the respect that should have been automatic from the beginning. Rachel Torres working the first-class cabin, this flight stopped by Elara's seat. Dr. Mitchell. I just wanted to tell you Brandon Griffin called me. He wants to meet about implementing changes. Real changes. He said you recommended me to be part of the process. Elara looked up. You earned it, Rachel. Your documentation, your willingness to speak up even when it was difficult. That's valuable. Don't let them waste it. I won't. Rachel's eyes were bright. I promise. The boarding process continued smoothly. Seats filled. Bags were stowed. The cabin door sealed. Captain Reynolds' voice came over the intercom, warm and confident. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Thank you for your patience during this extended delay. We're now cleared for pushback. Our flight time to London will be 7 hours and 8 minutes. We've got a good tailwind, so we should make up some time in the air. Sit back, relax, and we'll have you in London before you know it. The engines began their powerful spool-up. The familiar sound that meant movement, progress forward motion. Elara closed her eyes as the plane pushed back from the gate. She felt the aircraft turn the start of the taxi, the acceleration as they moved toward the runway. This time there was no sudden stop, no alarming silence, just the smooth, steady progress of a machine working exactly as designed. The takeoff was perfect, the surge of power as engines reached full thrust, the steady acceleration down the runway, the gentle lift as the nose wheel left the ground, followed by the main gear. The climb into the night sky. Elara opened her eyes and looked out the window. JFK was falling away below them, a sprawl of lights and movement. They banked slightly, turning east toward the Atlantic. She thought about the young woman who'd slept in her car 15 years ago. The woman who'd been refused a hotel room and had responded by building a company. That woman would be proud of tonight. Not because of the confrontation, not because of the viral videos or the forced apology, but because when it mattered she'd stood her ground, she'd insisted on her dignity, and she'd used her leverage not just for herself, but to create change that would benefit others. That was the real victory. Natalie brought a hot towel and a small plate of warm nuts. Can I get you anything else before we reach cruising altitude, Dr. Mitchell? I'm perfect, thank you. And she was. While Flight 627 climbed toward its cruising altitude of 41,000 feet, The story it had generated was still unfolding on the ground across social media and in corporate offices across the country. In a luxury condo in Connecticut, Victoria Ashford sat on her white leather couch, still wearing her cream Chanel suit, now rumpled and stained with tears. Her phone sat on the coffee table in front of her like a bomb that had already detonated. She couldn't stop looking at it, even though every notification brought fresh horror. Her LinkedIn profile had been bombarded with comments. Her Facebook page, which she'd kept private, had somehow been made public or hacked, she wasn't sure which, and was filled with angry messages. Her Instagram, where she'd cultivated a carefully curated feed of luxury vacations and charity galas, was being flooded with screenshots of the viral video. But worse than all of that was the email sitting in her inbox. The one from Charles Brennan, CEO of Biomedica Pharmaceuticals, Victoria. After reviewing the video footage and consulting with our board of directors and legal team, Biomedica has decided to place you on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation into your conduct. The behavior displayed in the video is inconsistent with Biomedica's values of inclusion, respect, and professionalism. As a senior executive, you represent our company in all public settings. Your actions have caused significant reputational damage to Biomedica and have raised serious questions about your judgment and fitness for leadership. You are required to surrender your company credentials, laptop, and phone by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. You are not to contact anyone at Biomedica except HR and legal. You are not to make any public statements about this incident without prior approval from our communications team. The investigation will be completed within 2 weeks, at which time we will make a final determination regarding your employment status. Charles Brennan, CEO, Biomedica Pharmaceuticals Administrative Leave. The words felt like a death sentence. In 23 years of corporate work, Victoria had never been disciplined. She'd been promoted 6 times. She'd closed deals worth hundreds of millions. She'd mentored junior staff. She'd sat on diversity committees for God's sake. And now this. Richard was in his home office on the phone with Biomedica's chief legal officer. His side of the conversation was mostly, "Yes, I understand, and I'll cooperate fully," and "No, I haven't made any statements." When he finally emerged, his face was gray. "They're suspending me too," he said. 2 weeks administrative leave while they investigate whether my behavior violated the code of conduct. Victoria laughed bitterly. Code of conduct. We asked someone to move seats, that's it. That's all we did. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. She'd seen the video now, multiple times, forcing herself to watch what the rest of the world was seeing. The tone in her voice when she'd said "for her," the dismissive wave of her hand, the automatic assumption that Dr. Mitchell couldn't possibly belong in first class, the way she'd questioned a valid boarding pass, the way she'd spoken to the crew like they were servants who'd forgotten their place. It all looked so much worse on camera than it had felt in the moment. Her phone buzzed again. Another email, this one from the Greenwich Country Club. "Dear Mrs. Ashford, it has come to the attention of our board that you were involved in an incident at JFK Airport that has generated significant public attention. After reviewing video footage of the incident, the board has voted to suspend your membership pending further review." Victoria threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. Meanwhile, at Biomedica's headquarters in Philadelphia, an emergency board meeting was underway. The conference room was filled with grim faces staring at laptops and tablets showing the viral videos, the Twitter trends, the news articles that were already being published. "This is a disaster," the chief communications officer said. "We've had 47 media requests for comment in the last 6 hours. Our social media mentions are up 400%, and 95% of them are negative. There's a petition calling for Victoria's termination that has 35,000 signatures and climbing. What's the legal exposure?" asked the general counsel. "Potentially significant," the lawyer replied. If Dr. Mitchell decides to sue for defamation or emotional distress, we could be liable under respondeat superior if the court finds that Victoria was representing the company during the incident. She wasn't representing the company. One board member protested. She was a private citizen on a commercial flight. The lawyer shook his head. She's a senior vice president. She's a public face of Biomedica. Every action she takes in public reflects on us. That's the standard for executives at her level. Charles Brennan, the CEO, had been quiet through most of the meeting. Now he spoke, his voice tired. Here's what I know. Victoria Ashford has been with this company for 19 years. She's been a productive, effective executive, but she showed catastrophic judgment in this situation, not just in her initial behavior, but in doubling down when confronted, in forcing that captain to intervene, in creating a situation that went viral and has now damaged our brand. He looked around the table. I don't believe in throwing people away for one mistake. But I also don't believe in protecting executives from the consequences of their actions. We're going to complete a thorough investigation. We're going to interview everyone involved. And then we're going to make a decision based on our values, not on public pressure or media coverage. What about the NHS contract? Another board member asked quietly. That's the real problem, Brennan admitted. We were in final negotiations with the British National Health Service for a pharmaceutical supply partnership worth about $400 million over 5 years. But Dr. Ilara Mitchell's company, Novatech Cryogenics, has been competing for a complementary medical technology contract with the same NHS team. And now the board member pressed. Brennan pulled up an email on his tablet and read aloud. This is from Sir David Attenborough, head of NHS procurement. It was sent 2 hours ago. Dear Charles, in light of recent events involving one of your senior executives, we have decided to pause our negotiations with Biomedica pending resolution of the matter. The NHS holds itself to high standards of ethical conduct and expects the same from our partners. We will monitor the situation closely. The room was silent. Paused is just a polite word for canceled, the CFO said quietly. Brennan nodded. Victoria Ashford's behavior on that plane may have just cost us $400 million, and that's not including whatever we have to pay Dr. Mitchell to keep her from suing us into oblivion. Back in Connecticut, Victoria's phone buzzed again. She retrieved it from where she'd thrown it, the screen now cracked in one corner. The notification was from Forbes. They'd published an article titled, When Privilege Meets Consequence, How One Executive's Behavior Grounded More Than Just a Plane. She clicked it, unable to stop herself. The article detailed the entire incident. It had quotes from passengers who'd been on the flight. It had analysis from diversity experts about implicit bias in public spaces. It had a statement from Skybound Airlines promising policy changes. And it had a brief comment from a spokesperson for Novatech Cryogenics Dr. Mitchell handled an unfortunate situation with grace and professionalism. She looks forward to her continued partnership with clients around the world, including the NHS. The NHS. Victoria's stomach turned to ice. Richard, she called out. Did Biomedica lose the NHS contract? He appeared in the doorway. Yes. An hour ago. Paused indefinitely, but we both know what that means. And who's getting it? You know who. Novatech. Victoria whispered. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. I handed it to her. I handed her a $400 million contract because I couldn't keep my mouth shut about a seat on a plane. The cosmic irony of it was crushing. Victoria had recognized Dr. Mitchell in the lounge, had realized who she was, but by then it was too late. The words had already been said. The videos had already been recorded. The damage had already been done. She thought about all the times she'd sat on diversity panels at Biomedica. All the times she'd talked about inclusion and opportunity. All the times she'd believed herself to be one of the good ones, someone who supported progress. But when actually faced with a successful black woman in a space Victoria considered her own, all that rhetoric had evaporated. The automatic assumptions had taken over. The implicit bias she'd have sworn she didn't have had revealed itself in the most public, most permanent way possible. There was no taking it back, no rewind button, just consequence after consequence cascading through her life like dominoes. Her phone buzzed again. A text from her sister. "Vic, I'm seeing your name everywhere. What happened? Are you okay?" Victoria stared at the text for a long moment, then turned her phone off entirely. She wasn't okay, and she wouldn't be for a very long time. Brandon Griffin stood at Gate 47, watching Flight 627 disappear into the night sky. The aircraft was just running lights now, a moving star against the darkness. He checked his watch, 11:07 p.m. 7 minutes past scheduled departure, but considering they'd been grounded for 4 hours, it was practically a miracle. His phone buzzed. Christine Park, his VP. "Brandon, how did the reboarding go?" "Smooth. No incidents. Dr. Mitchell was treated with the respect she should have had from the beginning. She's in the air now." "Good." Christine paused. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about Rachel Torres and her documentation." Brandon walked away from the gate, heading toward a quieter area of the terminal. "What about it? I want to bring her into our passenger experience review team. Not just as a consultant, but as a permanent addition. She has insight we clearly lack. And if she's been documenting problems for 3 years, that means she cares enough to fight for change. Those are the people we need." "Agreed." Brandon made a note. "I'll set up a meeting." "There's something else," Christine said. "I've been reviewing the social media coverage of this incident. It's massive, Brandon. Millions of views, thousands of shares. This is going to be a case study in business schools. A teaching moment about corporate crisis management and individual accountability. Is that good or bad for us? Depends on what we do next. If we implement real changes, if we're transparent about our failures, if we create measurable outcomes, then maybe we come out of this stronger. If we just issue a generic apology and move on, we'll be the villain of the story forever." "So, what's our play?" Christine took a breath. "Tomorrow morning, I want you to work with legal and HR to draft a comprehensive plan. Passenger experience audits. Bias training that's actually meaningful, not just checking a box. Anonymous reporting systems with real teeth. And I want regular third-party reviews to make sure we're actually changing, not just saying we're changing. That's going to be expensive. So is the lawsuit Dr. Mitchell could file if she wanted to. So is the reputational damage if we do nothing." Christine's voice was firm. "We failed tonight, Brandon. We failed one of our passengers in a profound way. We only got a second chance because she was gracious enough to give us one. Let's not waste it." "Understood." After the call ended, Brandon remained in the empty gate area. The cleaning crew was already prepping for the next flight that would use Gate 47 in the morning. The rhythms of the airport continued indifferent to the drama that had played out here hours earlier. He thought about Dr. Mitchell's calm face as she'd laid out her conditions, the precision of her requirements, the way she'd demanded accountability not just for herself, but for the system that had failed her. He thought about Victoria Ashford's forced apology delivered in front of strangers and cameras, her perfect composure finally cracking under the weight of consequence. He thought about the flight attendants who'd stood up for what was right, Natalie, Rachel, Emma, and how easily they could have just gone along with the Ashfords' demands to avoid conflict. And he thought about how many other incidents there must have been over the years. Moments where someone was questioned, doubted, challenged. Moments that didn't have cameras. Moments that didn't go viral. Moments that just happened and then everyone moved on. Except the person it happened to. They didn't get to move on. They carried it. Brandon pulled out his phone and opened a new email to Christine, copying HR and legal. Subject Flight 627. Incident Comprehensive Review Plan. Christine. Following up on our call, I recommend we structure our review around 3 key questions. How many similar incidents have occurred that we don't know about because they weren't reported or weren't escalated? What barriers exist that prevent passengers and employees from reporting discrimination when they see it? What would meaningful accountability look like at every level of our organization? I suggest we bring in external consultants who specialize in organizational bias and passenger experience. I suggest we create a passenger advisory board with diverse representation, and I suggest we empower our frontline employees to stop situations like this before they escalate. Dr. Mitchell shouldn't have needed to be a CEO with leverage to be treated with respect. Every passenger deserves that. Let's build systems that guarantee it. Brandon. He hit send, then stood and walked toward the terminal exit. It was late. He was exhausted. But he also felt for the first time in hours like maybe something good might come from this disaster. In London, where it was now 4:30 a.m., Sir David Attenborough of the NHS sat in his home office unable to sleep. He'd spent the evening reviewing the social media coverage of the JFK incident. He'd watched the videos. He'd read the responses. He'd seen Biomedica's tepid statement about conducting an investigation. And he'd made a decision. He opened his laptop and began writing an email. To Dr. Ilara Mitchell, CEO, Novatech. Cryogenics. CCNH. S. Procurement. Team. Subject, expanded partnership. Dear Dr. Mitchell, I trust you are well, and that your flight to London will be uneventful for the remainder of the journey. I write to inform you that the NHS has made a decision regarding our partnerships in the medical technology sector. After reviewing recent developments and reassessing our values alignment with potential partners, we have decided to expand our contract with Novatech Cryogenics. The original agreement was for 40 hospitals over 3 years. We are now prepared to offer 58 hospitals over 5 years, with an option to expand further pending successful implementation. Additionally, we are pausing indefinitely our pharmaceutical partnership discussions with Biomedica. An organization's values are reflected not just in their policies, but in the behavior of their leadership. We have not been satisfied with what we have seen. We look forward to welcoming you to London and to a long and fruitful partnership. Warm regards, Sir David Attenborough, Chief Procurement Officer, National Health Service. He hit send, then closed his laptop, and finally went to bed. At 41,000 feet over the Atlantic, Dr. Ilara Mitchell had no idea that email was waiting for her. She was reclined in her seat, a blanket over her lap, watching the moving map on her screen show their progress over the dark ocean. In 7 hours, she would land in London. She would go to her hotel shower change and head to the NHS offices for her 9 a.m. meeting. She would sign a contract that would change the trajectory of her company, and more importantly, would save lives through better medical technology. But right now, in this moment, she was simply a woman on a plane heading home to the work she loved. The cabin was dark. Most passengers were sleeping or trying to. The only sounds were the constant hum of the engines and the occasional quiet footstep of a flight attendant checking on passengers. Ilara closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come immediately. Her mind kept replaying the events of the evening, not with anger or triumph, but with a kind of weary recognition. This wouldn't be the last time. There would be other Victorias, other situations where someone decided she didn't belong based on nothing but the color of her skin. But maybe, just maybe, tonight had changed something. Maybe the viral videos would make the next Victoria think twice. Maybe Rachel Torres' documentation would lead to real policy changes. Maybe some young black woman watching the videos would see that standing your ground was possible and worth it. That was what mattered. Not revenge, Not humiliation, but change. Ilara finally drifted off to sleep as the plane carried her east toward morning. The courier from Skybound Airlines arrived at Novatech Cryogenics Newark facility at 9:47 p.m. The building was normally closed at that hour, but David Chen, Ilara's assistant, had made the 30-minute drive from Manhattan to meet them. The facility was a modern structure of glass and steel, 3 stories of laboratories and clean rooms where Novatech's proprietary technology was developed and manufactured. David unlocked the main entrance and led the courier, a nervous young man named Marcus, who'd been pulled from a dinner with his girlfriend for this emergency run through the security checkpoints. They required Dr. Mitchell's authorization code, David explained, as they walked through corridors lit by emergency lighting. The components are kept in a climate-controlled, secure vault. Without the code, I can't access them. He led Marcus to a heavy steel door marked Restricted Access, Authorized Personnel Only. David entered a code on the keypad. The door clicked open, revealing a room that looked more like a bank vault than a storage facility. Inside were rows of shelving units, each containing carefully labeled components in sealed containers. David went directly to a specific shelf, scanned a barcode with a handheld device, and retrieved a brushed aluminum case about the size of a shoebox. Cryogenic Flow Regulator Model X, WB-97, he said, checking the label twice. Serial number matches your maintenance request. He opened the case to verify the component was intact. A small cylindrical object, matte silver, covered in precise markings and connection points. It looked almost mundane, but David knew it represented thousands of hours of engineering and materials science. That little thing grounded a whole plane, Marcus asked, peering at it. This little thing keeps the auxiliary power system from overheating during sustained high-altitude flight, David explained. Without it, the temperature regulation fails and you risk cascading system failures. It's a safety-critical component. How much is it worth? About $80,000 to manufacture and certify. But the plane it keeps flying $300 million. The passengers on that plane, priceless. He sealed the case and handed it to Marcus with a form to sign. Get this to JFK as fast as you can. People are waiting to get home. Marcus nodded, clutching the case like it contained nitroglycerin. The drive back to JFK took 52 minutes through light evening traffic. He delivered the component to the maintenance team at 10:58 p.m. Frank, the chief maintenance engineer, opened the case and examined the component with a practiced eye. Perfect. This is exactly what we need. He turned to his team. Let's get it installed. We've got about 60 minutes before we need to have this bird ready to fly. The installation was delicate work. The cryogenic flow regulator had to interface precisely with the APU's cooling system. Connections had to be sealed. Calibrations had to be exact. Frank supervised every step, double-checking measurements, testing pressure ratings, verifying that each connection met specification. At 11:47 p.m., he ran the final diagnostic test. The computer screen showed green across all systems. He picked up his radio. Operations. This is maintenance. Component installed and verified. Flight 627 is cleared for service. Brandon Griffin's voice came back immediately, relief evident even through the radio static. Copy that, maintenance. Excellent work. We're beginning reboarding now. The passengers who'd been waiting in the terminal for 4 hours were tired, frustrated, but ultimately relieved. They'd been offered meal vouchers and rebooking options, but most had chosen to wait. Now, finally, they were getting on a plane. The gate agent made the announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, Flight 627 is now ready for boarding. We'll begin with first class and premium passengers, followed by groups 1 through 5. We thank you for your patience. The line formed quickly. People were eager to get moving, to get across the ocean, to get to their destinations. As they filed down the jet bridge, most were too focused on their own relief to think about the component that had been installed, the courier who'd driven through the night, or the CEO who'd authorized its release. But a few remembered. Tyler Brennan tweeted one final update. Flight 627 is boarding. The part that was needed came from Dr. Mitchell's company. She authorized its release despite how she was treated. That's grace. #leadership. Sofia Ramirez posted to her Instagram story 4 hours after being told she didn't belong in first class. Dr. Elara Mitchell just saved this entire flight. Remember her name. Remember this story. This is what real power looks like. The tweets were shared hundreds of times. The story continued to spread. In Connecticut, Victoria Ashford saw the updates. She was curled on her couch, unable to move, unable to process the scale of the disaster she'd created. Richard sat across from her, equally shell-shocked. She saved the flight, Victoria whispered. After everything we did, after how we treated her, she still saved the flight. Richard said nothing. What was there to say? Their phones had both been buzzing constantly for hours. Messages from colleagues expressing shock, messages from friends asking if they were okay, messages from reporters asking for comment. They'd ignored them all. But one email Richard couldn't ignore came at 11:58 p.m. It was from Biomedica's CEO, Charles Brennan. Richard. The board met this evening. After reviewing the incident and its consequences, including the loss of the NHS contract, we have made a decision. Effective immediately, you are terminated for conduct unbecoming an executive of Biomedica Pharmaceuticals. Your termination is with cause, which means you forfeit unvested stock options and severance. Victoria's case is still under investigation, but I wanted you to know the board's decision regarding your employment before you read about it in the press. Please arrange with HR to return all company property by end of business tomorrow. Charles Brennan. Richard read the email 3 times. Terminated. For cause. No severance. No stock options. 21 years with Biomedica gone in a single evening. He looked at Victoria. They fired me. She turned to him, her face hollow. They're going to fire me too. You know they are? He nodded slowly. Yeah, I know. They sat in silence as midnight came and went. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Flight 627 was cruising smoothly toward London, its passengers sleeping peacefully, unaware of the drama that had made their journey possible. And in seat 2, a doctor. Elara Mitchell slept as well, dreaming of the meeting that would change everything tomorrow morning. The NHS contract, the expansion into Europe, the lives that would be saved by her technology. She'd earned this. Through years of work, through determination, through refusing to be diminished by people who underestimated her. Tonight had been a detour, an ugly reminder of battles she'd thought she'd left behind. But it had also been a demonstration of something important, that preparation meets opportunity, that leverage matters, that standing your ground can create change that ripples beyond yourself. When she woke as the plane began its descent into London, the first light of dawn was breaking over the British countryside. The captain's voice came over the intercom, smooth and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into London Heathrow. Local time is 6:32 a.m. Weather is partly cloudy. Temperature is 12 degrees Celsius. We should be on the ground in about 20 minutes. On behalf of everyone at Skybound Airlines, thank you for flying with us, and we apologize again for the departure delay. Elara stretched, feeling the stiffness of 7 hours in an airplane seat. She looked out the window at the green patchwork of English fields below the motorways with their early morning traffic, the suburbs of London spreading out in all directions. By the time they touched down, she would have received Sir David's email expanding the NHS contract. By the time she reached her hotel, news of Victoria's firing would be breaking on business news sites. By the time she walked into the NHS offices for her 9 a.m. meeting, she would be the subject of dozens of think pieces about grace under pressure, about corporate accountability, about what real leadership looks like in moments of crisis. But right now, in this moment, between sleep and arrival, she was just a woman who'd stood her ground when it mattered, who'd turned an insult into an opportunity, and who'd reminded the world that dignity is non-negotiable. The plane's wheels touched the runway with barely a bump. Perfect landing. 3 days after the incident, Rachel Torres sat in a conference room at Skybound Airlines' corporate headquarters in Queens. Across from her were Brandon Griffin, Christine Park, 2 representatives from HR, and a consultant from an equity and inclusion firm called Threshold Partners. Rachel Brandon began, "Thank you for meeting with us. We asked you here because Dr. Mitchell mentioned that you've been documenting incidents of passenger discrimination. We'd like to understand what you've seen and what changes you think we need to make." Rachel pulled out a folder. She'd printed everything wanting a physical record. Inside were 23 incident reports spanning 3 years. Each one detailed an interaction where a passenger of color had been treated differently than white passengers in similar situations. "This is from March 2023, she said, pulling out the first report. Black woman in first class Atlanta to New York. White passenger claimed she was in his seat. She had the correct boarding pass. He'd misread his. But the gate agent sided with him initially, asked her to step aside while they verified her ticket. Took 15 minutes. She missed boarding, priority had to wait until the dispute was resolved. The white passenger was never asked to verify anything." She pulled out another. June 2023. Hispanic family with 3 children in premium economy. White passenger complained they were being too loud. Flight attendant asked the family to keep their children quiet. But there was a white family with children in the same cabin being equally loud, and they were never spoken to. Another report. September 2023. Black businessman in first class. Purchased duty-free items. White flight attendant asked to see his receipt 3 times to make sure he'd paid for everything. We don't do that with white passengers who buy duty-free. Rachel went through report after report. Each one individually could be explained away as a misunderstanding, a coincidence, an isolated incident. But together, they painted a pattern. Christine Park listened with an increasingly grim expression. Why wasn't this reported up the chain? It was, Rachel said quietly. I filed every one of these through our internal reporting system. Each time I got the same response, we'll look into it, or thanks for bringing this to our attention, or we appreciate your vigilance. But nothing ever changed. No training was updated. No policies were revised. The incidents kept happening. Did you ever hear back about the investigations, the HR representative asked? Twice. Once, I was told that the situation had been addressed with the employee. Another time I was told that there was insufficient evidence of discriminatory intent. Rachel met their eyes. I kept documenting anyway, because I kept hoping that eventually someone would take it seriously, that someone would see the pattern. We're seeing it now, Christine said, and it's unacceptable. She turned to the consultant from Threshold Partners. Based on what you're hearing, what do you recommend? The consultant, a woman named Dr. Simone Baptiste, had been taking notes throughout. I recommend a 3-phase approach. Phase 1, immediate training for all customer-facing staff on recognizing and interrupting bias. Not the usual corporate training video, actual scenario-based training with consequences for failure. Phase 2, restructure your complaint system. Make it anonymous. Make it accessible. And most importantly, make it transparent. Publish quarterly reports showing how many complaints were received, what categories they fell into, and what actions were taken. Accountability has to be public. Phase 3, create a passenger advocacy board. Staff it with people who've experienced discrimination while traveling. Give them real authority to review policies and recommend changes. Don't just ask for their input. Actually implement what they tell you. Christine nodded, making notes. Cost. Dr. Baptiste smiled slightly. Less than one lawsuit. Less than one viral video. Less than one major PR crisis. Put it in those terms and it's cheap. The meeting continued for another 90 minutes. They discussed specific policy changes, anonymous reporting systems with protections for whistleblowers, regular audits of how different passenger demographics were treated, metrics and accountability for managers. At the end, Christine turned to Rachel. "We'd like to offer you a new position, Director of Passenger Experience and Equity. You'd report directly to me. Your job would be to implement these changes and to serve as an internal advocate, to make sure what happened to Dr. Mitchell never happens again." Rachel stared at her. "Are you serious?" "Completely. You've been doing this work without support or recognition for 3 years. It's time we gave you both. Are you interested?" Rachel felt tears pricking her eyes. "Yes. Absolutely yes." "Good." Christine extended her hand. "Welcome to the team." After the meeting, Brandon walked Rachel back to the elevator. "You know this won't be easy," he said. "Change is always hard. You're going to face resistance from people who don't think there's a problem." Rachel nodded. "I know. But I also know what I've seen, what I've documented. If I can prevent even one person from experiencing what Dr. Mitchell went through, it'll be worth it." The elevator doors opened. Rachel stepped in, then turned back. "Mr. Griffin, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Before all this happened, if I'd come to you with these reports, would you have listened?" Brandon was quiet for a moment, considering the question honestly. "A week ago, I don't know. I might have been polite, thanked you for the information, and then done nothing. Because it would have been easier to dismiss it as isolated incidents than to confront the possibility of a larger problem. And now I've seen what happens when we ignore problems until they explode. Now I've watched a CEO with more grace than we deserved turn a crisis into an opportunity for change." He met her eyes. "So yes, Rachel, now I listen." The elevator doors closed. Brandon walked back to his office where his computer was open to a draft email. It was his 30-day progress report to Dr. Mitchell as promised. He'd spent the last 3 days compiling data, meeting with consultants, and drafting policy changes. The email outlined everything: Rachel's promotion and new role, the passenger advocacy board being formed, the new training programs, the anonymous reporting system, the quarterly public reports on complaint resolution. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough to undo the harm, but it was a start. He hit send, then leaned back in his chair. On his computer screen was still a tab with the viral video of the seat confrontation. He'd watched it probably 20 times now. Each time he saw something new. The micro-expressions of bias. The way Victoria's entitlement masked as politeness. The quiet dignity of Dr. Mitchell's response. But he also saw the witnesses. Tyler Brennan pulling out his phone. Sophia Ramirez starting her live stream. The other passengers watching, some with discomfort, some with anger, but all of them present, all of them bearing witness. That's what had made the difference. Not just that Dr. Mitchell stood her ground, but that others saw it, recorded it, shared it. That the incident couldn't be denied or minimized or swept away. Accountability required witnesses. Change required documentation. Justice required people willing to stand up and say this is wrong, even when it was easier to look away. Brandon closed the video and opened his calendar. He had a meeting with legal in 30 minutes to finalize the new policies. Then a call with Dr. Baptiste about the training rollout. Then a town hall with skybound employees to explain the changes. The work was just beginning. But for the first time in his 22-year career with airlines, Brandon felt like the work might actually matter. 3 months after Flight 627, the world had moved on to new stories, new scandals, new viral moments. But for the people involved, the ripples continued. Skybound Airlines had implemented every change Brandon Griffin had promised. Rachel Torres, now Director of Passenger Experience and Equity, had overseen the rollout of new training programs across all skybound hubs. Anonymous complaint submissions had tripled, but so had resolution rates. For the first time, passengers who experienced discrimination had a way to report it and see results. The Passenger Advocacy Board had met twice, reviewing policies on everything from boarding procedures to crew discretion in seat disputes. 2 recommendations had already been implemented: body camera requirements for lead flight attendants during passenger confrontations, and a policy requiring supervisors to review all incidents where a passenger's credentials or boarding pass were questioned. Brandon had kept his promise to Dr. Mitchell, sending her quarterly updates on progress. She'd responded to each one with brief professional notes acknowledging the changes. No praise, but no criticism either. Just recognition that the work was happening. Victoria Ashford had been fired from Biomedica Pharmaceuticals 6 days after the incident. The investigation had been a formality. The viral videos were evidence enough. Richard had been terminated the same day. Neither had found new executive positions. Their LinkedIn profiles, once showcases of corporate success, were now monuments to career destruction. Every recruiter who Googled their names found the videos. Every interview ended with awkward questions about the incident. Victoria had tried a public apology tour. She'd given an interview to a business podcast attempting to position herself as someone who'd learned from her mistakes. It had backfired spectacularly. The comments section had been brutal. People saw through the performance, recognized the apology as self-serving rather than genuine. Richard had been quieter, withdrawing from public view entirely. He'd taken a consulting position with a small pharmaceutical firm in New Jersey, far from the boardrooms where he'd once held power. Biomedica Pharmaceuticals had never recovered the NHS contract. Sir David Attenborough had been true to his word. The partnership with Novatech Cryogenics had expanded even beyond the revised terms. By month 362, NHS hospitals were using Novatech's cryogenic systems. Organ transplant success rates had improved measurably. Lives were being saved because of technology that Dr. Ilara Mitchell had developed. Novatech's valuation had climbed to $3.8 billion. Dr. Mitchell had been featured in Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People list. The profile mentioned the Flight 627 incident briefly, but focused more on her technology and her leadership philosophy. Dignity is non-negotiable, she'd told the interviewer, and leverage should be used not just to lift yourself up, but to open doors for others. The article had resonated. Young women in STEM programs cited her as inspiration. Business schools added the Flight 627 case to their curricula as an example of crisis management and ethical leadership. But Dr. Mitchell herself had moved on. She was in Geneva now, negotiating a partnership with the World Health Organization. She was in Seoul, consulting with Samsung on cold storage systems for humanitarian aid. She was everywhere. Her technology was needed, building, expanding, changing lives through science. The incident on Flight 627 had become a footnote in her biography. Important? Yes. Viral? Certainly. But not defining. She was defined by what she built, not by what others tried to take from her. One afternoon in late autumn, Dr. Mitchell received an unexpected email. Dr. Mitchell, you don't know me, but I was a passenger on Flight 627. I sat in row 7 economy. I watched everything that happened in first class during boarding. I watched the videos afterward. I followed your story. I'm writing because I want you to know something. I'm a 22-year-old black woman about to graduate from MIT with a degree in bioengineering. I've spent 4 years being questioned in labs, having my ideas dismissed, being told I'm only here because of affirmative action. I was starting to doubt whether I belonged in this field, whether I had what it takes to make it in science. Then I saw you, standing your ground, refusing to move, demanding the respect you deserved, and then saving the flight anyway. Not because you had to, but because it was right. You showed me what's possible when you refused to make yourself smaller to make others comfortable. You showed me that success is the best response to doubt. I'm going to finish my degree. I'm going to apply to PhD programs. And someday I'm going to build something that matters just like you did. Thank you for not backing down. Respectfully, Jasmine Howard. Dr. Mitchell read the email 3 times. Then she replied, Jasmine, thank you for your message. It means more than you know. You're right that success is a good response to doubt. But don't wait for others to doubt you before you prove yourself. Build because you're called to build. Create because you have something to offer the world. Let your work speak so loudly that people have no choice but to listen. The world needs what you're going to create. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Keep going. Dr. Alara Mitchell. She hit send and closed her laptop. That email, more than the magazine profiles or the expanded contracts or the billions in valuation, reminded her why the incident on Flight 627 had mattered. Not because of the viral videos or the public apologies or the corporate policy changes, but because somewhere someone who needed to see it had watched a black woman refuse to move from a seat she'd earned. And that person had learned that resistance was possible, that dignity could be defended, that standing your ground could change not just your own life, but ripple out to change others. That was the real consequence of that evening. Not revenge or punishment, but inspiration. Proof that the fight was worth it. Evidence that change was possible. Dr. Mitchell stood and walked to her office window. The Geneva skyline stretched out before her mountains, in the distance the lake reflecting afternoon light. 15 years ago, she'd slept in a car in a Boston parking lot and promised herself she'd build something that mattered, something that couldn't be denied or dismissed. She'd kept that promise. And somewhere in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Jasmine Howard was in a lab working late on her senior thesis, refusing to let doubt slow her down, building her own future one experiment at a time. The work continued. The ripples spread. The world changed slowly but surely, one moment of resistance at a time. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, I want to share what this means to me personally and why I chose to tell it. I've spent years collecting stories like this. Stories where someone gets dismissed, underestimated, or flat out disrespected, and then the tables turn in the most spectacular way. But this one hits different, because it's not really about revenge. Dr. Alara Mitchell didn't want Victoria Ashford to suffer. She wanted Victoria to learn. She wanted the airline to change. She wanted the next black woman, the next person of color, the next person who doesn't fit someone else's narrow idea of who belongs to have an easier path. That's leadership. That's real power. Here's what I've learned from stories like this. First, your dignity is not negotiable. Alara could have taken seat 3C to avoid conflict. Many of us would have, but she stood firm. Not because she's stubborn, but because she knew that every time someone backs down from unfair treatment, it gets easier for the next person to be treated unfairly too. When you accept less than what you've earned, when you make yourself smaller to make others comfortable, you're not just harming yourself. You're setting a precedent. You're teaching people that they can get away with it. Alara understood that. She didn't fight just for herself. She fought for everyone who would sit in that seat after her. Second karma isn't magic. It's consequence. Victoria didn't lose everything because the universe is mystical. She lost everything because her character was finally exposed. The cameras, the witnesses, the viral video, that's modern accountability. And thank God for it. We live in a time where behavior that used to happen in private now happens in public, where discrimination that used to be invisible is now documented, where people who abuse power can't hide behind politeness and deniability. That's not cancel culture. That's just culture. Actions have consequences, always have. The difference now is that we all get to see it happen in real time. Third, real change requires leverage. Alara had a choice. She could have just authorized the part and moved on, but she used her leverage to create lasting change. The ban, the donation, the policy reforms. That's how you turn a personal injustice into collective progress. But here's the lesson that keeps me up at night. Most people in Ilara's position never get this moment. Most people fight discrimination in quiet, invisible ways every single day, and there's no viral video, no public apology, no redemption arc. So if you're watching this and you've ever been dismissed, doubted, or told you don't belong somewhere you earned the right to be, I see you. Your fight matters even if it doesn't make headlines. And if you're watching this and you've never experienced this kind of treatment, pay attention. Because the Victorias of the world rely on silence. They rely on witnesses looking away. They rely on good people saying it's not my problem. The Tyler Brennans and Sofia Ramirez's in this story, they mattered. Their phones, their live streams, their willingness to say, this is wrong. That's what turned a private humiliation into public accountability. So here's what I'm asking you. Be a witness. When you see injustice, don't look away. Record it. Report it. Speak up. Your voice has more power than you think. Be like Rachel Torres. If you work inside a broken system, collect evidence. Document patterns. Wait for the right moment. Change comes from the inside and the outside. And be like Ilara Mitchell. Know your worth. Stand your ground. And when you get leverage, use it not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. This channel exists because I believe that justice, real justice, is possible. Not always, not easily, but possible. I believe that people who abuse power should face consequences. I believe that dignity matters more than comfort. I believe that one person standing firm can change the trajectory of an entire organization. But I also believe in complexity. Victoria Ashford isn't a cartoon villain. She's a person who carried biases she probably didn't even recognize, who made assumptions based on a lifetime of seeing certain people in certain places, who when challenged doubled down instead of reflecting. She's a cautionary tale. But she's also a human being who destroyed her own life through pride and prejudice. I don't celebrate that. But I do recognize that sometimes consequences are the only thing that creates change. Sometimes public humiliation is what it takes to break through denial and force real reckoning. Have you ever stood up for what's right even when it cost you something? Or have you witnessed someone else do it? Share your story in the comments. Let's build a community of people who refuse to accept the unacceptable. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to see it. And subscribe because we've got dozens more stories like this. Stories of people who refused to back down, who demanded their dignity, and who changed the world just by standing firm. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And remember, the next time someone tells you that you don't belong somewhere, make them prove it. Because chances are you belong there more than they do. The seat is yours. Don't let anyone take it. See you in the next one.